About a week into NFL free agency, it's very clear that the Philadelphia Eagles have some holes to fill on their roster moving forward this offseason that they must address. And whether that's through free agency or through the draft, we're not 100% sure the direction the Eagles are going to take. But what we do know is that Howie Roseman has a plan on how he's going to fill out this roster, and he's going to continue to make moves in attempts to fill these holes moving forward. And over the past couple days, they've been able to do just that with multiple moves in free agency. And this news, and another big piece of news, could potentially hint at a shocking draft day move for the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're going to talk all about that in this video today. But before we do that, make sure you go subscribe to the channel for more consistent Philadelphia Eagles content coming throughout the entire offseason. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure you subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video if you do enjoy. And now with that being said, let's get into the video. It was pretty clear that heading into free agency, the Philadelphia Eagles were going to lose a good amount of players, as they had a bunch of guys, 20 to be specific, that were set to hit the open market. And now at this point in the offseason, obviously that notion has came true, as they've now lost 10 players to other teams in free agency. And despite these departures, the Eagles have done a pretty good job, in my opinion, of retaining some of their other key guys to soften the blow, and I think they've done a pretty good job of weathering the storm. But even so, with all these guys signing with other teams, that left the Philadelphia Eagles with a couple holes on their roster that they had to fill, and there was two really glaring positions of need after all these guys left, and those two positions were the safety position and the linebacker position. And then the Eagles have also downgraded at multiple other positions, including the running back and defensive tackle spot, which you could also argue those are positions of need as well. So it's safe to say that the Eagles had some work to do moving forward in the offseason, as they had to address some of these positions, and the positions they had to absolutely address are the safety and linebacker positions. And moving forward in the offseason, the Eagles could also look to address their running back and defensive tackle spots. We're going to get to that a little bit later, but the question became, how are they going to address these positions? Well, over the past few days, they've made some moves to address the most glaring holes on their roster at the safety and linebacker positions. As most recently, the Eagles have gone out and signed Nicholas Morrow, a former linebacker from the Chicago Bears, to a one-year deal, and this is a very interesting signing. Nicholas Morrow now is going to come into that linebacker position, a position obviously, like I just said, that was a huge need for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he will most likely be the starter opposite Nakobe Dean in the 2023 NFL season. And he's a really interesting guy because I think he's a player with a lot of upside. Last year with the Chicago Bears, in his lone season with the Bears, he had the best year of his entire career, leading the team in tackles with 116, 11 of those for loss, and he also had an interception, and he was able to turn himself into a very solid player for the Bears last season. Even though their defense wasn't all that great, he was one of the bright spots, and he definitely showed some promise. Obviously, like I said, he's a good tackler. He led the team in tackles, but he's also very aggressive in the way that he plays. He's able to fly around to the ball carrier, and he's a hard hitter as well, which I think is something that all Eagles fans like to see. You could ask whether his tackles are inflated or not, because the Bears defense obviously didn't have all that much talent on it, and their run defense wasn't all that great. You could ask whether he was able to get a lot of tackles because the running backs were able to get to the second level, but still, he had a very productive season. I don't think it's fair to assume that this was just a fluke year, because throughout his entire career, Nick Morrow has been a somewhat solid player. He's never really been a starter before last season, starting all 17 games for the Bears, but with the Las Vegas Raiders for 4 seasons, he had 29 starts, but he was able to show some promise in the time that he did get to play. And again, I think that this move really fits with the theme of the Philadelphia Eagles offseason and in free agency in terms of what they've been doing in adding new players, as he's another guy who maybe he hasn't had the most amount of opportunities in his career, but when he has had those opportunities, he's shined in them. Now, a lot of the other guys the Eagles have taken chances on this offseason on cheap deals were injury-prone guys that haven't got their chance to play really. Now, Nick Morrow was a guy who was injured for the entire 2021 NFL season, but for the rest of his career, he's been pretty much healthy, and last season obviously was the best year of his career, as he was given a bigger opportunity, given a bigger role, and he showed what he was able to do in that role. But even before that with the Raiders, he was kind of limited in his opportunities, but he still made the most of them, and now he gets to come to the Eagles. He's going to have a bigger role. I would guess he's the starter next to Nakobe Dean, like I said earlier, and he's going to have the chance to show what he can do. I think he's going to come in here with the Eagles and surprise a lot of people with the production that he's going to have. And overall, I think this is a really good move because, again, this is another move that is low cost with a high upside. Now, maybe they're not done adding at the linebacker position, but from what we understand now, it seems like Nick Morrow is going to be a starter. And even though I wanted a guy like Bobby Wagner, I understand why they made this move. It's cheap, high upside, and I'm excited to have him on the team and excited to see what he can do. And then the other move that the Eagles made a couple days ago was signing Justin Evans, former Buccaneers and Saints safety. And, I don't really have too much to say on this move, and that's why I didn't really really talk about it or cover it in another video before this because I think Justin Evans is pretty much just going to come in here and add depth at that safety position. I don't see him making a big impact. I don't see him being a starter. He's a guy who was starting to show a little bit of promise in his first couple years in the league with the Buccaneers, but then he didn't play for 3 straight seasons because he was injured for 2019 and 2020 with an Achilles injury, and then he just didn't play. He wasn't on the team in 2021. And then last season with the Saints, he didn't really have a huge impact. He was on the roster, but he didn't really get to contribute much. And he's a guy who, despite the Eagles, again, the theme of their offseason and bringing in these new guys have been low risk, high reward players, and they got him for very, very cheap. But I don't see him being a guy that's going to come in here and play big snaps and have a huge impact. I definitely think the Eagles are going to do something else at the safety position. But what's really interesting about this move is the report that came along with it from guys like Zach Berman and John Clark. And John Clark specifically reported that they're not going to be done at safety yet. As he said, "I'm hearing the Eagles are not done bringing in players at safety. It is a long offseason." Now, we don't know if that's through free agency or through the draft. I would have to assume it's through free agency because Justin Evans was a guy that got through free agency. This was reported within the same post that Justin Evans signed with the Eagles. And also, the Eagles aren't really a team that's known for going out and drafting safeties early. That's one of the positions they don't value as much. So I would assume they're going to go out here in free agency or some other way and try to address that safety position. Kevin Byard is obviously the #1 option the Eagles should go after should he be cut from the Titans. He's super talented, and I think he'd be an upgrade at the safety position from CJ Gardner-Johnson, but there's also plenty of other guys. But yeah, all this in mind, it looks like the Eagles' main ways of addressing that safety and linebacker position is through NFL free agency and not the draft. And then you have to start asking, once the Eagles start to fill up all these other positions on their roster, and where are they going to go in the draft, especially in the first round as they have 2 picks? What positions are the Eagles going to focus on as they head closer and closer to the NFL draft? Well, the 2 other positions that need to be said the Eagles had before talking about safety and linebacker were running back and defensive tackle, or just a defensive lineman in general. And I think it's very likely that the Eagles take a defensive lineman some point early in this draft because obviously Howie Roseman and the Eagles organization really value that position. They value the trenches. I could definitely see them taking a defensive lineman early. So then that just leaves running back as one of the other biggest holes on the Eagles roster. And you start to ask the question, could the Eagles actually consider taking a running back early in this draft? Well, I think that this recent news of them signing Nick Morrow, signing Justin Evans, addressing these other positions in free agency could be hinting at this possibility. And then even more recently, we got some even bigger news hinting at the fact that the Eagles could be looking at taking a running back in the first round. And that news is that Texas running back and one of the top prospects in the 2023 NFL draft, Bijan Robinson, is visiting with the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is obviously very interesting. This is a pretty early meeting in the pre-draft process between Robinson and the Eagles, and I think he's the first guy I've heard of any of the potential first-round picks the Eagles could take that's visiting with the Eagles in Philadelphia. So this obviously shows that the Eagles have a high amount of interest in Bijan Robinson. And something else to keep your eye on is the fact that Bijan Robinson and Jalen Hurts both have the same agent. So, maybe they've talked behind the scenes, maybe they know each other, and maybe that could have some sort of influence on the Eagles wanting to bring him to Philadelphia if Jalen Hurts is a fan of him as well. And at this point, the Vegas odds are determining that the favorite for the Philadelphia Eagles to select at the 10th overall pick in the draft is Bijan Robinson. As shocking as that sounds, that is the case right now. And this is obviously, very, very interesting. If the Eagles get Bijan Robinson, I personally would think that would be amazing. And I don't think anyone can really deny that. Bijan Robinson is one of the more surefire picks in this draft. He's easily the best running back in this draft class, and he's one of the best players in the entire draft. He's being called a generational talent, and I don't really like that term because I feel like it gets thrown around too loosely at times, but it sounds like this guy is really, really special. And he's drawing comparisons to Saquon Barkley. He's been called the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley, and Bijan Robinson is just a great all-around running back. He's a powerful, physical runner. He's 6'2", 220 pounds. He fights through contact, but he's also a very elusive guy. He's shifty, and he has very good ball carrier vision as well. He can pretty much do everything at that running back position, and he put up some really impressive numbers throughout the course of his college career. Just last season with Texas in 2022, he had 258 carries for 1,580 yards, 18 touchdowns, and a 6.1 yards per carry average, and his total stats in his 3 years at Texas sit at 539 carries for 3,410 yards, 33 touchdowns, and 6.7 yards per carry. These stats are incredible. They're super impressive. Obviously, combine that with the fact that he's just a really good all-around player. He plays for a good school like Texas. If you were to add Bijan Robinson to the Philadelphia Eagles offense, that would just make them absolutely unstoppable. I mean, for you to have Jalen Hurts at quarterback, an MVP candidate, you put Bijan Robinson with him behind that offensive line, and then you start running those RPOs where the defense has to make a decision on whether they want to go try to stop Bijan Robinson potentially on the handoff over here, or have to make the guess whether Jalen Hurts is going to pull it and run it this way, or he's going to pull it back and pass it to one of the Eagles' dynamic pass catchers. It would just make the offense that much harder to stop. And if Bijan Robinson were to come to Philly, you would then have a guy who's most likely elite at that running back position for the next 4 to 5 seasons, and you wouldn't have to pay him that much for his elite level of production that I think everyone expects from him coming out of the draft. And I absolutely think the Eagles should go out and make this move if it's possible. Like I just said, I think he'd make the offense unstoppable. And another thing about it is he might be the best player on the board at that point. He's being ranked as one of the most talented players in the entire class, but because of the notion that you don't take a running back early, he might be sitting there when players that maybe aren't quite as good as him at other positions have already gone. And I think if he's there, it'd be a good idea to go and select him. Now, I'm not saying that I'd be upset if they were to go with another position as long as they think they're getting the right guy and they're getting a really talented player. But what I am saying is that you definitely cannot go wrong with selecting Bijan Robinson. Bijan Robinson's not going to be a guy that the Eagles select and then he plays a year and then you look back on it saying, oh man, that was a really, really bad pick, because he's that talented, he's that elite. The only way I could see that happening is if he deals with some injury issues. So hopefully if they were to do that, that wouldn't happen. So I definitely think picking Bijan Robinson would be a good move for the Eagles in the first round. But the question is, how realistic of a possibility is this? There's plenty of people that think the Philadelphia Eagles already are set at the running back position. They obviously have Kenny Gainwell, and I'm a big fan of Gainwell. I think given the opportunity, he could be a very good running back in this league as well. And he's a guy that, I think is good. He's got good field vision. He's shifty. He's elusive. He's a little small maybe, but in the opportunities he's had, he's made the most of them. And he also is good out of the backfield catching passes. He can do that as well. He can also block. And, he's just a really solid running back. It's just he's unproven. He has not shown that he can be a running back one in this league, and who knows if the Eagles are confident he can do that or not. And then they have a guy like Rashad Penny, who he's very, very good when he's on the field, averaging over 6 yards a carry over the past couple seasons. But the problem with him is you can't rely on him to stay healthy. He's coming off a broken leg last season, so I don't think the Eagles are really going to rely on him to carry a heavy workload in the backfield as well. And then Boston Scott's a guy who's good, but he's definitely not a running back one. He makes the most of his opportunities, but he's not a guy that's going to get, 10 plus carries per game. That's just not what's going to happen. And that's why you might see them being linked to a guy like Bijan Robinson. And then of course you have the people that are like, well, you don't draft a running back early, and Howie Roseman doesn't value the running back position, so it's not going to happen. There's no way this could possibly happen. Well, in regards to the statement that you don't draft a running back early, I think that's true in most cases, but there are also cases that you make an exception for. And from what it sounds like, Bijan Robinson is potentially one of those cases that you do make that exception for because he's that good. And then for the people that are like, well, Howie Roseman doesn't value the running back position, he would never pick a running back in the first round. That's generally been true. He hasn't done it in his entire tenure as the Eagles general manager. But what I will tell you is this: back in 2017, the Philadelphia Eagles wanted Christian McCaffrey. They wanted to draft him in the first round. They were looking to trade up for him and go get him in the first round, and it just never ended up materializing because they really liked Christian McCaffrey and they saw how talented he was. Obviously, he's panned out and turned into a fantastic player in the league with the Panthers and now the 49ers. But, the Eagles have looked into doing this before under Howie Roseman. And also back in 2019, they drafted Miles Sanders in the second round, which sure, that's not a first round pick, but that's a pretty high valuable draft pick that they spent on a running back. So it's definitely not impossible. Howie Roseman has shown signs in the past that he's willing to use valuable draft picks and valuable assets on the running back position if the guy is talented enough. And I think Bijan Robinson is a similar case to Christian McCaffrey, where Howie Roseman and the Eagles might really like him, and I think that's why you see, he's now visiting in Philly. Not saying that they're going to end up picking him in the first round, but I definitely think it's a possibility at this point. But what would you guys think about the Eagles taking Bijan Robinson in the first round of the draft this year? Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video and want to see others like it. Again, drop a like on this video if you did enjoy it. And if you want to watch another Eagles video, you can go watch this right here. CJ Gardner-Johnson is gone. Watch this video detailing the potential replacements the Eagles could target. With that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this video, guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.